Yeah, boy, it's August 3rd, and it's episode 141, and this is a Fantasy Football Auctioneer podcast. The Fantasy Football Auctioneer podcast, the official podcast of the fantasyfootballauction.com, the internet's only website dedicated to fantasy football auctions. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Fantasy Auction, or follow us on Facebook. We are facebook.com/Fantasy Football Auctioneer. We've got a great show for you tonight. Tonight, we're going to answer one listener question. We're going to take a look a little bit at some fantasy football news, and then we're going to dive right into quarterbacks and tight ends. Tonight is no Slim, so it's just Blister and I tonight. So just going to think, Blister, he's laying in bed eating chips and dip. Blister, how's it going tonight?
Good, man. Good. No chips and dip. Good. I wish I had some chips and dip. But everything else is going fine.
Everything else is going fine. Good. Well, Slim couldn't make it tonight. We're doing a Wednesday nighter, so it's going to be Blister and I. We're going to, like I say, go through, answer a question, do some news, and then talk about quarterbacks and tight ends. So let's just move right into it here, Blister. If you guys are ready, then I'm ready. Let's cock the hammer. It's time for action. All right, so good show tonight. Quarterbacks and tight ends. It's August. Training camps are underway. This means that we start bringing in positional themed podcasts. So tonight we're going to do quarterbacks and tight ends. And I think, Blister, next week we're looking at maybe doing a live mock. If I looked at the schedule properly.
We should do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it did say live mock next week. We should do that. I haven't done one for a while, and I did want to look. I wanted to get a better feel of the numbers and what prices people were going for. I'm in a couple of drafts right now, and they're slightly different setups than our just normal straight up auction. So a mock draft would probably help quite a bit in terms of getting a feel for the values and where things are at right now. So hopefully we can pull that off next week.
Yeah, so we can do hopefully a live mock next week, and then follow that up with some receiver talk and running back talk, and then it's, deep into the preseason and getting ready for the Thursday night kickoff game. So, anyway, so we'll take a look at a live mock, and I've been kind of treating this data force draft, Blister, in that regards too. Like, it's my first it's my first auction of the season, so it's been interesting to take a look at some of the numbers. How'd your team look after it? It's not all said and done, but you have all 18 players, right? Right?
You kind of froze up on me, Bucks. I'm not sure if you can hear me. You froze up on me and got chopped up and cut out there quite a bit, but you've mentioned it a couple times. dataforceff.com. Pardon?
Yeah, no, I'm here now. Hold on. So can you hear me clear now?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Okay, so let me just do that again, and then I'll try to cut that because you were chopping too, because I could kind of hear you and you could kind of hear me. So I'll just try to do that again. I'll do a little clappy. And then away we go. So I've just been kind of treating this data force draft a little bit as a mock two, Blister. It's the idea that it's our first real auction of the off season here. So it's been interesting to take a look at some of the numbers that have been coming up. So the draft is still going on because there's one guy that, spent it all at the beginning and is just waiting for $1 bids now on this slow auction. But your team's full, right, Blister? I still cut again.
I heard nothing after you said this data force draft, then I didn't hear a thing after that.
It's one of those nights, Blister. I don't know.
Yeah. Why does it happen?
I think it's because I don't have a great connection because I moved my router to be closer to the dining room, and now I'm in the back. So should we try that again?
Probably.
This is not going my way tonight. What did I say when we texted, right? It was going to be like I just have nothing but fantasy football tonight. Morgan was supposed to be out, and then she didn't go, and then I thought Carrie Lynn would be late and everything would be good. All right. We'll try this again.
Yeah, when we're just talking,
Okay.
nothing. It doesn't break up at all when we're talking about nothing.
Yeah.
Where we start to go into our stuff, you cut right out.
All right. Let's try that again. Okay, so I'll do another. So Blister, this data force has been kind of like a mock for us, our first auction of the off season. So we're just taking a look at some of the numbers now. Your draft is complete. The draft is still going on, but you got all 18 players, eh, Blister?
I did, yeah. It was dataforceff.com, trying to promote the site. They hosted our auction for free and provided the prizes, so it's pretty cool. But pretty happy with my team. Like I talked a bit about this last pod, and it's a little bit different in the sense that it's a best ball. But you can you have one waiver wire move per week. So I was thinking in best ball format that I needed to have depth versus the studs and scrubs that I probably would typically go with. So I finished off, I picked up 2 defenses. I put in some pre-bids and I went out fishing. Great day on the lake, but I thought if I'm going to go with best ball format, I was only going to go with one of the better. If I could get a top 3 defense and a top 3 kicker, then I would just run with those guys all year long, and I wouldn't worry about streaming or picking up or best ball. I just hope for the best with them and then try to get more depth at receiver and stuff like that. So my last bid was $2 on the Vikings defense, and I got the Arizona Cardinals for $3. Typically in a draft, I might not pay $5 on 2 defenses, but I had the money and I wanted to be done. I picked up Dwayne Allen. Yeah, Dwayne Allen for $6, Rashad Jennings for only $3. I was willing to pay more, but nobody had the money left, I guess, at the time to bid me up. Frank Gore for $10. Marcus Wheaton, I was pretty happy with for $3 as well. Ladarius Green for $7. Crabtree for $10. Phillip Rivers for $7. Alan Hearns for $6 only. Because I still can't believe Alan Hearns goes so 8 years in a row, finishing up wide receiver 2 numbers, and people still don't give him any respect. Delaney Walker for $9, Larry Fitz for $13, Kevin White for $12, Drew Brees for $7, Randall Cobb for $31. I don't know how much I like that one. Josh Gordon for $6,
Eddie Lacy for $32,
Doug Martin $30. Yeah, so not too bad. I think I have 4 starting running backs. You only need to run 2 of them: Doug Martin, Eddie Lacy, Frank Gore, and Rashad Jennings. So if I can get 2 decent performances out of them. At receiver, Josh Gordon, Randall Cobb, Kevin White. So Josh Gordon and Kevin White are the big
question marks.
I guess, yeah, the question marks are the 2 that could really turn the tide for me. They both, I think, have potential to be outstanding receivers. Josh Gordon's got to get back to his old form, and Kevin White hasn't shown us played a snap in the NFL yet. So that's the 2 question marks. But if they can put up, even wide receiver 2 type numbers, I think I'll be doing pretty good. And Larry Fitzgerald, I think, was number 6 overall last year. Alan Hearns is always number 2. Michael Crabtree was top 15, I believe. Marcus Wheaton, I expect big things out of him since Martavis Bryant is out. Le'Veon Bell is going to miss some games. So I think Wheaton could be in line for 75 plus catches this year and possibly have the best year of his career. So with that draft, I was quite happy. Yeah.
Well, I was pretty happy too. We talked about it last week. My start with Kelvin Benjamin for 25, Allen Robinson for 40, Jordan Matthews for 16, and Mike Evans for 34. So pretty stacked at receiver there. And with it being best ball, I think I have good consistency there. And those guys are probably all going to be scoring for me, for the most part, for all 16 weeks. The running back, I picked up Matt Forte for 22 and Carlos Hyde for 19. I was happy with both of those prices. I think that tier of running backs is going to be pretty solid, especially in this format. I picked up Melvin Gordon for 9, and I actually don't mind Melvin Gordon. The more I've been looking, the more I've been seeing the amount of touches and if he's going to be healthy and all those things, I think that he should be able to perform past that $9 mark anyways. And then I also got Theo Riddick for $5 a little bit later in the draft in round 14, and I was happy with that too. He goes undervalued, just like you were talking about with Alan Hearns too. I mean, people are never high on him, and then when you look at his numbers, you go, whoa, PPR, he's an animal. Right, Blister? You're still here?
Yeah, okay. For sure. Yeah, I'm still here.
Just
Yeah,
making
no,
sure I
I
didn't.
thought that was a good deal on Theo Riddick. I mean, there's less competition there for him this year too. If Amir Abdullah struggles out of the gate, he's going to get more looks. They're going to pass the ball a lot, I think, this year in Detroit. And with Jim Bob Cooter running the show, and I think he's going to be in line for catching even more passes. He caught 80 last year, I think it was. So that's a great buy, and I think it gets to the point in the draft where people just don't want to believe that he can produce. But it's just like a Danny Woodhead; he could produce like those kind of numbers and
Yeah.
potentially be a top 15 back again in the PPR league.
So I went and then I
So.
kind of shot for the fences with the, back end of the draft with my wide receivers anyways. I was looking for high upside guys. And so I picked up Dorial Green Beckham for 6, Nelson Aguilar for 2, and then the big hype train on Bruce Ellington with the Chip Kelly offense. So I got him for $3. My quarterbacks right now, it is best ball, Jameis Winston for 2, Andy Dalton for 2, and then I have 3 tight ends. Again, it's best ball, so I was going to go 2. I ended up with 3. It worked out okay. I got Eric Ebron for 4, Jimmy Graham for 3, and Charles Clay for 1. So hopefully any given week I'm getting out of those 3, I can get a tight end 10, let's say, even, and that'll be okay by me, considering guys like Colby Fleener went for 17 and Greg Olson went for 17, and you spent $16-22 on tight ends. So hopefully with my $8 on tight ends, I can at least score in a top 12. One of them can. And then I got Houston D for $2 and Dan Bailey for $1. So I have a kicker too. So I'm pretty happy with the way things shook out. The first part of my draft, I probably got real lucky. I didn't have Wi-Fi, and then my draft started going a little bit south after that when I could actually pay attention to it. But I'm pretty happy with the team. I mean, if I can pick up a team like this in a couple more auctions this year, I think I'll be pretty pumped.
Yeah, you broke up a lot during your little talk of your team there again. Okay. I don't know when you look back. Can you like splice yourself back in when you listen to it, edit it?
I can cut I can cut me. I can cut you. Yeah. I can cut whatever I want.
Whatever you got. Yeah, so yeah, not a bad little team. Like both teams, I think I like our chances. I like having 3 tight ends. I think you mentioned them, Delaney Walker. I have Ladarius Green and Dwayne Allen. So 3 guys I think could all vie for top 10 easily, and perfect for ball format. They could all help at some point, I hope.
Yeah, well, and we were talking off air before we started recording about some of the deals that kind of stuck around there late too, and talking about this idea. Well, actually, you know what? Why don't we save it? And I think it helps with our question tonight, right? Very similar, I think. Yeah. Okay. So why don't we do that? Let's move it. Yeah. So let's just do that, and then we can maybe make some reference to some of those deals there too. So let's move into our first segment here, Blister. This one's called "We Just Got a Letter." All right, so we just got a letter. Well, actually, it was a direct message from our friend Derek Myers, the defending Scott Fishbowl champion, Derek Myers. He asked this question: "Hey guys, I heard this on a competitor's podcast, Dave Richards. Anyways, he was listening to another podcast, and he thought he might be interested, might bring it up for us to discuss on the podcast. So let's assume that the top 3 wide receivers, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, and Odell Beckham, go for $60 a piece. Is there any chance it would be viable strategy to buy all 3 and go super cheap everywhere else with the remaining $20, assuming the normal $200 budget?" So he's saying this. He spends $180 on Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, and Odell Beckham, and now he has $20 left over. Can he make a viable team, Blister?
Well, let's go through it real quick. I think it might be fortunate to get them all for 60. I just look at the recent draft we were just talking about. Julio went for 59, Odell 63, and Antonio 64. But let's just say you did get them all for 60. You could easily splice together a couple quarterbacks. I think if you're looking now, we're looking at $20 and we have an 18-team roster. You got $15 spots to fill. So you're looking at $1 per guy with about 4 guys worth $2 maybe. I think that's what it works out to. So at quarterback, Matthew Stafford and Joe Flacco, Alex Smith, Jay Cutler. I mean, there's a lot more after that, but you could easily take two of those guys and stream them because you're going to have to probably stream them at this point. So quarterback won't be an issue. I think wide receiver, I think you can do a decent job. You've got three, so you're probably not really concerned about your other wide receivers because who are you going to start over those three guys unless it's a bye week. But looking at $1 receivers, Rashard Matthews, Mohamed Sanu, Pierre Garcon, Robert Woods, Philip Dorsett, LaFell, Jalen Strong, Mike Wall. Like, there's a lot of guys there that if you only need 3 or 4 more of them at $1 a piece, you can easily get dollar receivers to backfill. Tight end, we go over to tight end, and again, tight end might be a little bit iffier, but you got guys like Charles Clay right now. Jordan Cameron could have a bounce back year with the offensive coordinator they have there. Will Tye potentially, if you had to go to a $2 tight end, Jason Witten's only going for a couple of bucks, so easily you could pick up. Again, you'd probably be streaming there, so two of those guys minimum. Obviously, kicker and defense are easy to pick up at $1 a piece. Then you go to running back. That's where I get a little bit concerned at running back. You can pick up some guys that have potential, but they might not be producing for you for quite a while. If I'm thinking about guys like Kenyon Drake or Darren Sproles. He might be okay to get you through some games at the start. Jordan Howard, CJ Prosise, Tim Hightower, Kenneth Dixon, all these kind of rookies that are potentially could take over at some point, but it's probably not going to be very early on. Josh Ferguson, Darren McFadden might not be a bad guy to grab right now. Ezekiel Elliott's kind of banged up, and who knows how long that'll linger. Cameron Artis-Payne, CJ Spiller. So I guess that would be the biggest scary part. I mean, if you had to spend a couple bucks on guys, you might be able to go up and get Tevin Coleman. He's going cheap if you're lucky. You might get real lucky and get Jerick McKinnon. Guys like Bilal Powell, guys like that. So I think you could do it potentially because the only position I really have concerns with would be the running back position. Are you going to have enough talent there to get you through? As you're going to have a lot of talent everywhere else, but a lot of the guys that I just mentioned are either in a running back by committee or they are at the back end of the depth chart for now, but have the potential to get to the top. So it would be a pretty risky move in the sense that you might be losing, a good running back each week could be putting up 20 plus points. So if you're dropping 40 because you really have nothing in that position, that could be a pretty big gap to make up.
Well, I think what you might want to do is, let's say you go Odell Beckham and Julio, let's say they're both 60, and then maybe come back with like a Jordy Nelson, under 40. And then you can have those $3 running backs, right? And if you look at our draft, and we were talking about this just like I said before we got on the air, Chris Ivory for 2, Rashad Jennings for 3. Jeremy Hill went for only $6. Justin Forsett for 4. Crowell was $3. Theo Riddick for 5. Like, you start getting into those $3, $4, $5 running backs, and you might be able to make yourself a little committee there.
Absolutely. With those guys there, you could probably add in Arian Foster and Charles Sims and different guys like that. And so let's say you take 2 of the top 3 wide receivers, and like you say, you have $60 basically to spread around between those running backs and whatever else you want to spread around. Like, you could still stick to dollar positions everywhere else, but you could even go up and get 2 $30 running backs if you wanted to, or go for a Carlos Hyde or these other guys, LaShawn McCoy, different guys like that. And all of a sudden now you have 2 starting running backs, and all your dollar running backs are fine because those 2 starters, you hope to get maybe 5, 6, 7 weeks out of them if it's a Rashad Jennings or somebody like that, like you were mentioning. And then by the time those $1 guys are playing, like you've got through to that point. Like I say it all the time, I got to quit bringing it up, but guys like David Johnson last year, you knew he had the talent, you sat on him if you drafted him for $1 10-year draft, and you waited and waited, and finally he'd come out right in time to lead you into the playoffs and to the championships. So there will be guys like that out there. There'll be guys like every year there's guys out there that we don't even talk about, nobody talks about, and suddenly they're irrelevant at some point in the season, especially at running back. So it's a bold strategy, but it could be worked, or could be tweaked slightly, and probably worked to success as well.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, basically he's talking about RB0, doing an RB0 draft. And I do like the idea, Derek, of asking us the question, because I'm sure on the CBS podcast, they weren't talking about it as an auction. They were talking about going RB0 and doing it as a snake draft. So taking some of those same principles of the snake draft, which we hear, all the other pundits talking about, but converting it into auction. I like the question because it's auction gives you the ability to really be flexible and make these types of moves. In a snake draft, you're never going to be able to draft Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, and Odell Beckham. They'll never be on your team.
No, that's for
unless
sure.
you have 3 picks in the first 5 in a 5-man draft, right? Otherwise you ain't getting them.
Yeah,
so,
that's for sure.
So good question, Derek. So if you have questions for us, you can tweet us at Fantasy Auction. You can email us at footballauctioneer@gmail.com. Derek sent us a direct message at Fantasy Auction, and that's how this one got on. So there's a lot of different ways you can contact us. You can message us on Facebook. We've had guys do that before as well. So that is an easy way for you to get a hold of us, is in any of those fashions. So that was segment number 1. We just got a letter. Blister, let's move quickly into segment number 2. We're not going to buy or sell tonight. We're just going to do segment number 2, fantasy football news. All right. So I just decided to take a quick little look at some quarterback and tight end news so that we can get right into quarterbacks and tight ends. So Blister, we won't even do necessarily a buy or sell. Let's just talk about some of the implications here.
Okay.
Does that sound okay? All right.
Absolutely.
All right, so the Bronco quarterback battle seems to be far from decided. So this is according to Pro Football Talk. On Wednesday, which is today when we're recording, Coach Gary Kubiak made it clear that he won't know who the starter will be for a while. And this is interesting because we have Mark Sanchez, who looked like he was going to be the number 1. Then they draft Paxton Lynch. And then we still got, how do you pronounce this guy's name? I want to say Seaman, but I know I'm not going to be saying it right. Yeah, Simeon. There it is. Oh, no.
Simeon.
Anyways, that's Coach Pow. That's how I never know how to read any names. Anyways, we got those 3 options right now in the mix, and he made some comments about this after practice where that left Kubiak very unimpressed with all 3 of his options. Surprise, surprise. So anyways, Blister, does it really matter right now as far as fantasy purposes who the quarterback's going to be to start week 1?
I don't think it really matters to us because I think everyone's probably holding them all kind of under the same umbrella in a sense that nobody's really wanting to draft quarterback. If anything, we all think that, the running game will be featured because in all situations they need to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quick. So a guy like C.J. Anderson hopefully will be putting up bigger numbers than what a lot of people are expecting. And we do all worry in all situations about the wide receivers, Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. We don't really have a tight end, so to speak, there that we have had any fantasy history or success with. So it really comes down to those 2 guys, and Cody Latimer apparently looked okay in camp the other day, which we expected that for a couple. No, the quarterback doesn't make a big deal. I mean, I think we know Sanchez, and as bad as he has been, everybody remembers a butt fumble. I do remember guys scrambling to the waiver wire and wanting to start him when he was running in the Chip Kelly offense, and he actually put up decent fantasy numbers. And you know what? I think as long as he's got half a mind, he would know to a stud like Demaryius Thomas and let him go up and get. And Demaryius is good enough to still put up quality fantasy numbers. He did when he had Tim Tebow in town, so I think he could still be fine. I think Paxton Lynch might offer a little bit more running ability and probably would maybe even run a couple into the end zone if he had the opportunity, which would also help. But again, nobody's really drafting those guys as their starting quarterback. Right. You don't need to. There's so many other quarterbacks out there. So no, it doesn't matter to me.
Right. And I mean, it doesn't matter for any of the other skilled positions in Denver. Not necessarily either, right? Because they're all the same.
Not really. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like I say, the running, should be featured no matter who starts, and we have a
Right.
little bit of concern with the receivers, and I think that's why Demaryius Thomas goes as late as he does, or for as cheap as he does now.
Right. Okay. Let's move into the second one. Bucks named Cameron Brate the starting tight end. So, in a nod to the hardworking, undrafted free agent, this is according to NFL.com, and a warning to the highly touted second round pick. The Buccaneers head coach has now confirmed a shakeup atop the team's tight end depth chart on Wednesday, which is today. So, Cameron Brate right now, Blister, is the tight end. Well, I don't know if he's tight end to own necessarily because it's still early in camp, but does this mean anything like to really scare you off of ASJ, or are you sneaking into Cameron Brate for $1 right now if you're drafting this early without looking at any preseason tape?
I am sneaking in Cameron Brate in a few spots. I actually traded ASJ in a dynasty league for a second-round pick for next year, so that was actually to our good friend Slim. So I don't know. Slim might have more faith in him than I do at this point, but I just figured that, again, there was a situation where we're going to pare down our roster anyways, and I wasn't planning on cutting him, but if makes it one less guy that I'll have to cut down the road if I can trade him off for a pick for the future. So Cameron Brate actually had, do I got the right year up here? 3 touchdowns last year. Safarian Jenkins had 3. Cameron Brate had 288 yards in 7 games, or 12 games, and ASJ played 7 games, so he had 338. ASJ's had a lot of bad press lately coming into camp.
Yeah, they sent him home.
He's sent home.
Yeah.
Who knows what to think at this point between the two guys? Like, I think the thing I read today was ASJ has the right attitude. Says he knows how good he is, and he just got to come out and play. And at this point in the year, it's hard to say who, if it's coach speak, if it's trying to light a fire under the guy, if it's trying to see what they really got, or if they really are, fed up with this guy. So it's hard to say because there's actually other tight ends too in Tampa Bay that, at one point, we either had hope in or had some fantasy relevance. So it'll be interesting to see how this does shake out. But yeah, I think, again, there's a lot of depth at tight end right now, and unless if you're in a best ball or like a draft and go, things like that, you might not really need to worry about the tight end situation in Tampa Bay at this point, much like the Denver quarterback situation. But it's something to monitor, right, because there are obviously guys that you're going to be able to pick up for very cheap, no matter who becomes a starter.
Right. Okay. So I mean, I didn't want to go through all the news. If you look at it, is about so and so looked good today, so and so didn't look good today, so and so left practice with a sore hammy or whatever. But the couple of things I thought were a little bit interesting, Blister, just to cap off the news, was James Jones to the Chargers because of the Stevie Johnson injury. Does that intrigue you there, where you were talking about Inman earlier?
Yeah, I think it is interesting because I actually thought Stevie Johnson might have a decent year this year. I picked him up in a lot of my best ball leagues, and he was on a lot of rosters. And that's too bad because I can't really drop him. But the worst part is I can't replace him. But I think James Jones could probably slip in there quite easily. And he's a veteran and he's had good years. And the thing is, he goes to a quarterback too that likes to throw the ball. Phillip Rivers. When he left Green Bay for a while and went to Oakland, he did okay, but he didn't have that established veteran quarterback. And he goes to, leaving and went back to Aaron Rodgers and was putting up touchdowns and numbers again. And now he goes to a guy like Phillip Rivers, who they're going to throw the ball quite a bit, no doubt about it. And if he can play the slot like probably Stevie Johnson would have, I think he's a guy that could, flourish and, look at probably making 3, 4, 5 catches a game perhaps. And probably your, maybe not quite a wide receiver 3, but a guy weeks at the very minimum, maybe a wide receiver.
Yeah, and he might be interesting in DFS at some point too. If you see him kind of going, he'll be dirt cheap. Yeah. So things to keep in mind. So then the second thing that I thought was a little bit interesting too, Blister, was Reggie Bush is now a Buffalo Bill. There's It's pretty messy in that Bills backfield. Any interest in Reggie Bush or any comments about the Bills backfield?
Well, it is a mess. I'm not really interested in Reggie Bush, but I would probably it'd be a guy I'd want monitor throughout the course of the next month to see how he's looking out there, because LaShawn McCoy, I mean, he hasn't really impressed for the last little while, and he has a lot of signs pointing up. He could be in for a good year, a bounce back type of a year, but yeah, my confidence isn't too high in him. But then you look at Carlos Williams, who's suspended. Jonathan Williams has got himself in trouble off the field too, the rookie that they drafted. Mike Gillislee is there. I have a couple shares in him here and there, but again, not a lot of, faith. Yeah. And, doesn't mean that he's not good because they brought in Reggie Bush, but they definitely don't have a lot of depth if the two Williamses are out. So I think it's just a situation that you'd monitor. I won't, and probably never will, but he's going to start in Buffalo at some point. You're going to want to have a starting running back.
Yeah. Well, and so you don't have any like Chris Johnson feel out of this? When Chris Johnson signs with the Cardinals, we're like, Chris Johnson, and then kaboom, he just goes.
No, not so much. I just don't like that offense as much in Buffalo. Sammy Watkins, I think he's going to be fine. There's so much talk about Sammy Watkins, with this injury, but I think he'll be fine for the start of the year and do great. But that's good that a lot of people are talking about it, because that keeps his cost down right now, because a lot of people are scared off. But overall, that offense isn't as scary as the Arizona Cardinal one.
Right. Okay, so that's Fans Football News Blister. Let's get into the meat of the show here. Tonight we want to take a look at quarterbacks and tight ends. So let's start off with the Fans Football Quarterbacks Blister. What are you looking at as far as strategy at the quarterback position heading into the 2016 drafts?
Well, I'm going to say a couple things, but one might contradict it a little bit later on based on some of the stuff. I got to do a little bit more research. But, right now I do see like Cam, Russell, Andrew Luck, and A-Rod going for over $20 and even into the 30s with Cam. And I look back to every other year. Like Andrew Luck last year was the guy who would go for 35. There's always somebody, right? A-Rod's usually up there. At one point, Drew Brees is in there, and Tom Brady's been around those numbers at times too. Peyton Manning. But I really don't remember any of our the winners ever having one of these expensive quarterbacks on it. Do you recall anything like that?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think we always chirp the guy for spending so much on a quarterback.
We usually do. So as much as I like Cam and he helped us win it, actually he did help us win the ECL title, but that was different last year because he got half a point per rush. And so he got us a lot of extra points that way, which I think in a situation like that, then a guy like Cam or Russell might be worth a few bucks because of the value there. But I think I crunched some numbers and I'll go over them later. Like my probably strategy this year is going to be looking at getting, I might get a $7 or $8 quarterback, or I might even drop down to a couple $2 or $3 quarterbacks, depending on how the draft is going and how my money is being spent. But I definitely can imagine, even if Cam went cheap at $20 or Russell went for 17 and Luck and Aaron Rodgers, that would be a hell of a deal on those guys. But I still feel that I could get great production from a $3 or $4 quarterback and spend the other $15 on my running back or receiver. So I just have a hard time doing that. And it's hard when you see such a deal on the board, but at the same time, I still look at it as, that's $20, and most of that I could have put into a better running back or receiver. What about yourself, Bucks?
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. I like that $2 to $3 range, which gets you into that quarterback, 15, 16, 17 type of a thing. I don't mind it at all. I'd rather spend my money elsewhere as well, because I don't think there's on a consistent week-to-week basis much of a difference from, I don't know, let's say quarterback 14 to quarterback 24. I think that any one of those guys, it's a giant tier, and it kind of looks like tight end, right? Where on any given day, one guy's going to look good, but are you taking Mariota? Are you taking Tony Romo? Are you taking Andy Dalton or Winston or Tannehill? They're all a dime a dozen, and a dime literally. And I think that that's kind of where I'm going to gun. Just when you were talking, I was thinking to myself, it would be interesting in your first or second nomination, let's say, to say Jameis Winston for $2 and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Well,
maybe
it would be.
nail them, and now you're set.
Well, and especially early on, people are going to think, well, there's like 30 other quarterbacks out there. I'm not going to spend 3 on Winston right now. Like I think you'd probably get them. I was looking at quarterback. I mean, you hear so much, especially in the last couple of years, thanks to JJ, of all the talk about streaming quarterbacks. So I started looking at, a couple of things. I went back to as far as 2011. And I looked at how many quarterbacks got over 300 plus fantasy points, and it was 12. 6 of them got over 350 plus fantasy points, and 5 quarterbacks in 2011 got over 400 plus fantasy points. So I looked at that. So in 2011, 12 guys in total over 300 fantasy points. Okay. Now in 2012, we had 14 go over points. Only 3 went over 400, but 14 went over 300, 10 went over 350. In 2013, we had 16 quarterbacks go over 300. The number that was over 350 went down to 6, and only 2 went over 400. But in 2014, we had 17 quarterbacks go over 300 fantasy points, 7 over 350, and 2 over 400. And in 2015, we had 18 quarterbacks go for over 300 fantasy points, 12 for over 350, and 3 over 400. So basically, the number that keeps increasing is the number of quarterbacks going for over 300 fantasy points in a season. It went from 12 to 14 to 16 to 17 to 18. The number over 400 hasn't been as consistent. It went from 5, 3, 2, 2, 3. So you're looking at 2 or 3 guys in there. And I thought, okay, that's one interesting stat. Also, then how many quarterbacks, are averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. And so that number went from 11 to 15 to 18 to 20 to 26. So guys are averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. Guys averaging more than 23 fantasy points per game went from 7, 8, 5, 6 to 10 fantasy. So overall, the number of fantasy points per game is going up. The number of quarterbacks throwing for, you got 26 guys in 2015 that averaged 20 fantasy points per game at quarterback. Wow. So that's a huge number compared to back in 2011 where only 11 quarterbacks did. So in 2011, you're looking at, there's still 11, basically almost 11 guys, obviously, that are QB1 material that you didn't have to spend big bucks on. So out of that quick research, and what I'll probably do is I'll probably throw us on some kind of a nice little chart so that people can do it, and I'll throw it on the site. But there's a lot of, we know that there's a lot of quarterbacks. It's more and more obvious all the time that there's plenty of quarterbacks out there that if you wanted to pick one quarterback and have one quarterback go, be your man for the year. In 2015, you could have had 12 guys that are getting over 350 points, which is, when you break it down, there's 12 guys over 350. That means that there's only 3 different guys that are over 400. So basically, there's 9 guys between 350 and 400 points, and there's 3 more guys over 400 points. So when you break that down into the cost, those top 3 guys are probably costing you the 25, 30 bucks, but then there's 9 other guys that are probably costing you between 7, 8, $6, $1 guys. So all of a sudden, for 50-point difference over 16 weeks, you're looking at about 3 points a week only, versus you take that $20 difference in price and pour that into a running back, could be obviously a huge difference and huge gain, right? So that's why we keep talking about quarterbacks. Like this year, when you look at the list from this year of all the guys that are out there, like based on that, Bex, like who do you like knowing that you don't probably have to spend 20, 33 bucks on Cam Newton or 25 on Andrew Luck. Like you look down that list and there's some guys that I'll point out, like Matthew Stafford, he's going for about $1. We have him ranked 21st. Jim Bob Cooter is the offensive coordinator. When he took over last year, Matthew Stafford's numbers were pretty phenomenal. Actually, where do I have it? Right here. He was putting up QB1 numbers consistently, and I just want a slow computer here. 1 second. I think it's not working. Oh, here we go.
There you go.
slowly but surely. But a guy like Matthew Stafford isn't a guy I had been targeting either. He ended up finishing as the 8th ranked quarterback last year, which I can't, it's hard to believe.
Really?
He had 4,200 yards, 32 touchdowns to only 13 interceptions, rushed 44 times for another 159 yards and 1 touchdown. Ended up with 363 fantasy points, averaged 22.7 per game. I mean, that nobody thinks that Matthew Stafford had a good year last year, and everyone's probably worried now because Gronk is gone, or Megatron is gone. Sorry, but I mean, in his last, since week 10 at Green Bay, he put up 20.2 fantasy points, then 23, 38, 21, 20, 24, 24, 27. Those are quality numbers, and you're going to be able to pick him up in your draft for $1. And knowing that the running game is questionable at best, with Amir Abdullah and Theo Riddick. Well, what's Theo Riddick? He's not the running game. He's catching more passes out of the backfield game. So there's a guy for $1 that I haven't even been targeting, but I think probably should be because you're going to get great numbers from him.
Right.
I think a guy like Joe Flacco too. He was hurt last year. Before he got hurt last year, he was actually putting up the most fantasy points per game in his career. Last year, let me see. Joe Flacco only played 10 games. He's averaging 21.6 fantasy points per game last year in the 10 games he played. And also, all of his weapons were hurt too. But before that was the best of his career. Before that, in 2014, 20.4. Before that, 18.2, then 18.7. And a guy like Joe Flacco, who's he got there for offensive coordinator? Mark Trestman. Trestman, everybody every other year calls the quarterback whisperer. There you go. You got 2 quarterbacks right there that are going to average over 20-some points per game. You can get them for $2. You could stream them week in and week out. And, you're going to have comparable numbers in the end to probably one of your top 3 quarterbacks.
Yeah. Well, and those
what do you
guys
think about in a second?
You're going to get those guys for $1, right?
Yeah.
Which is
so, yeah. Which is good, very cheap. So I mean, so since we're talking about that, I threw some more numbers together here for the fantasy. I'll have to throw this down on a chart too because I'll probably talk way too fast for everybody. But I looked at streaming quarterbacks last year. So these are guys that you would have either got for $1 or you would have grabbed off the waiver wire probably. So last year, Cam Newton was the leading quarterback. He was quarterback 1, 455.5 points, and this is just in a normal PPR, not getting extra points for rushing. So he averaged 28.5 points per game. So week 1, Mariota probably could have grabbed him off the waivers, or somebody might have took a stab at his or QB2, 27.1 points. Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo, week 2, 34.4. Tyrod Taylor in week 3, 27.1. Kirk Cousins, 24.6. This is, I mentioned a different guy. It's a new week. Week 5, Andy Dalton, 32.4. Week 6 and 7, where I went with Brian Hoyer, 27.2, 25.7. Week 8, Alex Smith, 29.1. Week 9, Merritt, 5.1. Week 10, Flacco, 29.5, 27.2. Week 12, Tyrod Taylor, again, 31.2. Week 13, Mariota, 42.6. Then weeks 14, 15, and 16, all Kirk Cousins, 26.3, 39.1, and 33.9. So if you would have had all those quarterbacks that I know didn't get drafted or were $1 off the waiver wire or wherever, they would have put up 492.5 points. That would have been an average of 30.8 fantasy points per game. And that would have beat different quarterbacks there, Blister. It's pretty hard maybe to stream them all. Somebody might own them. Yeah. How is that possible? So I cut it down to only taking Tyrod Taylor, Marcus Mariota, and Kirk Cousins, because it would have been quite possible to have those guys. So where I didn't mention those names, I went back and substituted their points in. And in some cases, it worked out to be a little bit better, or some cases a little bit less. But just with Kirk Cousins, Tyrod Taylor, and Marcus Mariota, they put up 476.7 fantasy points. Still better than Cam. Averaged 29.79 fantasy points per game. So almost averaging 30 fantasy points per game. And that was Cousins, Tyrod Taylor, and Mariota. You weren't drafting Kirk Cousins and Tyrod Taylor. And Mariota. So that's pretty darn good. And that would have been definitely a reasonable thing. If you're going to stream, you might as well have 2 or 3. You're going to have 2, obviously. You might as well have 3 if you can pick. I mean, you would have had to been part, on the ball part, maybe genius to know exactly which weeks to play them and stuff. But
Right.
it's only tough at the beginning, really. Like when you start seeing, how teams match up against another team's defense, or how weak this team was last week, they give up this many fantasy points for this person and so on, then you can start playing the matchups a lot better. Like there was some matchups last year, you just knew you had to play the opposing quarter, like DFS. If you play DFS, you really pay attention to that more so because you're, it's a weekly thing. You're playing week to week and you're trying to win good cash doing it. So I think to me, that's more than enough proof that if you can get those kind of numbers out of Kirk Cousins, Tyrod Taylor, and Marcus Mariota, that would have averaged actually better than Cam Newton, who was by far and away the number one guy, then so be it. I mean, you have to put in more time. You have to be a guy that can't just draft your team and walk away from it. Like if you draft Cam, boom, you're set at quarterback. You don't draft anybody else. But if not, you're going to have to play the waiver wire bit. You're going to have to pay attention and stream. And it's just interesting the numbers that you can actually put up by doing that and then put that money into something else.
Well, and that was going to be my question is, so sure, you could take these undrafted guys or $1 guys, but when do you play them? And that's the other thing you took, which one was the best that week, and the best ball, it doesn't matter. And that's why you love drafting those types of guys in best ball. But yeah, you need to, especially for those first few weeks, trying to figure out, well, which guy am I starting this week? And because you don't know much about them, especially those guys last year. I mean, you didn't know what Tyrod Taylor and Kirk Cousins are going to do and Mariota is going to do as a rookie. But I think that's got to be the ballpark that you need to be drafting in. If you look at overall points, I don't know, let's say around quarterback 9 is 290 whatever points down to like quarterback 16 or 17 where you're about 270. I mean, you're only at 20, 25 points difference between those guys, which is a couple points a week when it's all said and done. And I think saving a few bucks there, adding $5 to your receiver and going from Jordy Nelson to Allen Robinson or whatever it might be is going to score you more than 2 points a week, So,
well, you know what? I'll tell you, Bucks, I actually have some numbers on that too, and you didn't know that. But I looked at all the positions, and I looked at the top player and the 12th ranked player in each position just to compare, your QB1. This is the top end QB1 to the bottom end QB1 and so on. And I only did it for 1 to 12 at each position. And obviously the reason why we don't need to spend a lot of money on defense is from the defense 1 to the defense 12. The difference in points per week was 1.7 fantasy points per game. So you don't have to go and spend $8 on Seattle when you can get somebody else for $1 down the road that can 0.7 fantasy points per game is not big. And then we always said the same about kickers, why you don't have to go nuts on kickers. The difference from the number 1 kicker to the 12th ranked kicker was 2.2 fantasy points per game. Then interestingly enough, the third lowest was tight end. From tight end 1 to tight end 12, the difference last year was only 3.5 fantasy points per game. Which, if you added all these up, it's going to be substantial. If you're going to be looking at 10, 23, about 24 points probably, if you had all the number 1s versus the number 12s. Sometimes I've won leagues by 0.1. I know that. But then the third one is at running back. The difference at running back from the number 1 to the number 12 was 4.5 fantasy points per game. The second largest difference from 1 to 12 was actually at quarterback, 6.3 fantasy points per game. And the number 1 overall difference from the number 1 receiver to the 12th ranked receiver was 7.4 fantasy points per game. Okay. So the thing is, but I mean, so the biggest two.
I don't know. The only thing there, like if we are going to reference back to JJ and his point is of those onesie positions, right? So quarterback 1 through 12. Is that where you're just going to go? Okay, because it's comparing apples to oranges, really, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the key. That's what I was going to say. It looks like it's a big difference, but in receiver, you're probably starting 3 of them. So if you can still go back, like I said, I showed you fantasy points for those Tyrod Taylor, Kirk Cousins, and Marcus Mariota that they would have outscored Cam Newton, who's your QB1. Those guys weren't your QB1 every week. They were some of those guys, were some of those weeks. But, you could make up that difference in fantasy points per game. But here's the difference. If you drafted Cam Newton last year, or if you took whoever it was at eighth, say, or who was number 12 last year? I just want to find that out real quick.
Who finished 12? Or was preseason 12?
I'm just going to see who finished 12 last year.
I don't know. I have like Philip Rivers in front of me.
Yeah,
according to fantasydata.com, I have Philip Rivers at 12, Ryan Fitzpatrick at 11.
I had Aaron Rodgers at 12 on this one, but Philip was 10, 11. Anyways, the key is, though, if you're going to spend less money on your quarterback, you can put more money into that wide receiver position. And then definitely if it goes from the first ranked receiver down to the 12th, it's 7.4 points. If you're going down to the 36th ranked wide receiver, there's going to be a bigger gap. But you go back to the onesie position, like we were saying, it's much easier to play a streaming thing with a tight end or with a quarterback versus like with 3 of them. So the gap is, if from 1 to 36 is going to be quite substantial, or 1 to 24 and running back is going to be even more so. If you can grab, that's where you take that extra money that you didn't spend on your quarterback or potentially even your tight end and pour it into those positions that you need to have. If you can get 2 or 3 guys at receiver that are potentially top 12 or top 15, that could be the difference maker. That's where the gap in the points is produced over top of, streaming your quarterbacks and not picking the most expensive one.
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. And that's the argument JJ makes with the late round quarterback idea, is that we say, well, you look at the difference between running back 1 and running back 12 and compare that to quarterbacks, and you can't compare it because of that, right? The idea that you, in your league, there potentially could be, if you're running 3 wide receivers and flex and it's PPR, I mean, you could have 48, 50 receivers being started. So,
oh, for sure. Well, even to go from the first ranked receiver last year down to the 36th ranked receiver, you're losing 13 points a game. So if you can, then take that money that you saved on quarterback and pour it into, 2 or 3 of these other receivers, probably top 15, you're going to, lessen that, decrease that difference or that point differential at receiver and put yourself in a strong spot and still be able to produce those top points at quarterback or tight end, because you only need one guy and you can start, you got so many choices out there, even off the waiver wire, that could potentially produce any given week.
Right. Yeah, well, exactly. And the 3 guys you mentioned earlier are just waiver wire pickups, right? So
yeah. Yep.
So anyways, I think that's kind of where I'm looking to, is in that kind of that range, and however that tier kind of shakes out, hopefully you can get it somewhere in the middle of that horseshoe and get the guys, rather than $4 or $5 in that tier, get them for 2 or 3 and run a couple of those guys. And speaking of that horseshoes, I'm putting an article up that Slim has wrote today. We'll put it on the website, and it'll be a little bit of a preview available in the free area and the full one in the membership area. But it's about this auction horseshoe, the idea of how tiers and when the players within that tier get nominated, how to try to save a couple bucks by grabbing the guys in the middle of that tier, of the nomination tier. So that article will get hopefully put out tonight. So it'll be available for full article available for members tomorrow. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for, Blister, when it comes to the draft. Is I don't care who it is. I just want to make sure he's a $2 quarterback.
Yeah, and I think there'll be a lot of choices there, and I think you can't go wrong with that. But I think Kirk Cousins is. I think he'll be in line for a good year again. Marcus Mariota should be good. I think they were talking about letting him run the ball more, so he should be able to pick up more points that way. So it just seems to be there's so many guys, and even the numbers do show that the number of fantasy point producers in the last 5 years has gone quarterback, where there's so many. I mean, you're looking at, like I said, 26. Did I say 26 guys last year had 300 plus points? So that is maybe. Oh, that was 2015. No, I think I might have said 18. I don't know what I wrote down. I got too many things going on right now, and I don't have the right page here. 26 guys averaged 20 plus points, but 18 quarterbacks got over 300 plus points. I mean, 18 quarterbacks on any given week, they're obviously having good weeks, but that means there's more than, you're starting 12 usually in a normal league, 12 starters, and you got more than that sitting there on the bench that are putting up points all the time too. So at quarterback, I think that's the way to go. But what do you do, Bucks? Now all of a sudden, if you're sitting there and staring at, because everyone listened to us, and I'm not paying on quarterbacks, all of a sudden, Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or Cam or somebody's sitting there and they're $7, $8, $9. At what point do you say, oh, it's just too cheap, I can't take them? No. I mean,
well,
is there a point for you?
Oh, I think so. I think a guy, I don't think you're going to get Cam for, less than $20 or those types of guys. But I think that, let's say you see Aaron Rodgers in that, I don't know, $15 range. I think you got to take a poke at him there. But a guy like Aaron Rodgers, I have an issue with him is that he's not always consistent from game to game to game, right? Like he's up and down, and we've talked about this before on the podcast that he from week to week isn't a great performer. It's at the end, by the end of the season, he's got great numbers,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, and if Jordy Nelson stays banged up or tweaked, I mean, then that'll throw a whole wrench in that whole offense. I mean, without Jordy Nelson last year, Cobb was terrible. Devontae Adams, who was supposed to be good, was awful. So it'll just be awful.
But I mean, even if you go back, I'm just looking at game logs for Aaron Rodgers in 2014 when Jordy was there. He's 13 points, 32 points, 12 points, 32 points, 19 points. Like, I mean, if I'm going to spend $15 to $20 plus on a quarterback, I want him scoring
25,
points every
27,
week.
35. Yeah.
And if you look at, and we've talked about this before, but so Jordy Nelson was there. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, he had 4 weeks in 2014 with less than 14 points. 14 points. Not 24 points or 34 points. Like, that's terrible.
Yeah,
right? You might as well put Alex Smith in there.
That's right.
And pay $1 or $2 for Alex Smith, and you're always going to get quarterback 14 out of him. But 14 points is not going to get you quarterback 14.
No, that's right.
And so those are some of the issues that I have, even with some of those higher end quarterbacks. I'm actually going to look at Alex Smith right now in 2014, 17 points, 23, 25, 12. He had 2 games the whole season where he was under 14 points. Three looking here. So he had, right? So he consistently scores better. Does he have the 32-point game? No, he doesn't. But he does have, 3 or 4 or 5 games that are in the 20s, and you spent $1 or $2 on them rather than spending $20. And so that's the big issue I have at the quarterback position. And yeah, I mean, I think Slim last year, didn't he end up taking, I feel like he spent money on a quarterback and he wasn't necessarily planning. Maybe he was price enforcing and got stuck.
Peyton Manning one year.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But I was shocked. I just blew me away. I thought, what, Slim? And I think he was trying to price enforce and got him. And then I think that screwed things up for him. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, that's my philosophy anyways. And I think there's going to be some guys in your draft, and we've got guys in our draft that they don't want to have to screw around with who am I starting this week? Who am I not starting this week? They just want to be able to plug and play. And they're like, all right, I'm going to spend $32 on Andrew Luck. And I'm going to do it. And I'm going to, and I'm going to set it and forget it. And I'm going to do all year is really work hard at who am I playing at flex.
Yeah.
Right. That's where they want to work hard. And that's fine. That works so great for me.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah. I'd like to see them spend.
I'll take Matt Ryan and and Alex Smith or Ryan Tannehill, or spend $2 or $3 in any of those two types of guys, and it'll be just fine.
To all our listeners who are going to go with a cheaper quarterback, nominate Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, Andrew Luck, and Aaron Rodgers first. Get them out there. Let people spend $25, $35 on them, because that takes money out of their pocket. So when they start bidding on running back or receiver, they won't have it. So get them out there. Get them out there that you don't want, so that the money is gone, and it'll just help you out even more.
Yeah, and then sit on it for a little bit. Find that tier that's a sweet spot that you like, and say, okay, Phillip Rivers, and set a price point for that tier, right? And let a guy or two in that tier go, and then hopefully you'll get the sweet spot of that tier, and you got to be patient on it. That's the big thing. I think this year there's 18. Well, let's take a look at our rankings. You can go all the way down to really Alex Smith at 24, Jay Cutler at 25, or at 24. Sorry. You could have any of those guys, right? So you just be patient. Don't feel like, I'm not going to get a quarterback. You're going to get a quarterback. I think the waiting game makes it tough too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm 2 hours into our auction draft. I don't have a quarterback.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. So many.
Yeah.
Especially in a 12-team league that only starts one. The guys I just don't understand. When you watch, you'll see guys draft Aaron Rodgers and pay $28 for him, and then turn around later and draft Ben Roethlisberger for $9. It just doesn't make sense, but that'll happen too. And that's even better.
Bye week covered. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's just terrible.
But if you're gonna do all that work to say, who am I going to start, Andrew Luck or Ben Roethlisberger every week, then why not do the same amount of work to say, who am I going to start, Marcus Mariota or Kirk Cousins?
You might as well. Yeah.
Because it's harder to pay the big money on Andrew Luck and then have him on your bench that week.
Yeah, that's right.
Which we've talked about before too. Another reason to lowball these onesie positions, because if it doesn't work out for you, you have no problem putting them on your bench. You have no problem dropping them for, Mark Sanchez, or, who all of a sudden goes off and goes crazy, right? Like Nick Foles did before, won me a championship because I, drop Andy Dalton, pick up Nick Foles, and drop Nick Foles and play Andy Dalton, right? And won me the championship that year playing those things.
Nicky Foles, he might be a cowboy, they say.
That's what they say.
Would that be ironic? You won your championship and go to your team.
There you go. Yeah,
now,
but I think that's part of it there. So, anyways.
I don't know. I was going to say something, but I forgot what, so it can't be too important. Maybe we better talk about tight ends.
Well, I was just going to say we're must be late by now. Tight ends are more or less the same thing for me, Blister. You've got, it's just like the quarterback position. You're going to have a few guys that are going to go for a lot of money. I don't think I'm going to spend that at the tight end position either, because I think that there's that tier in tight end 10 to tight end 22 that you could take it or leave it, kind of.
Yeah, with the same thing, I've done never will I own Gronk. He's too expensive in an auction. Jordan Reed, he's going for a lot of money, and he's really one concussion away from not even being in the league, so it's a little scary. Greg Olsen, I like him, but I can't imagine paying $25 for him, or 15 even. Delaney, I can't imagine me playing double digits for really any tight end. I don't think you need to. Delaney Walker, Kobe Fleener, Kelsey, they're all projected to go for double-digit money. Tyler Eifert might not, especially if he misses some games. The guy has a bit of an injury history. But there's not a lot of options in Cincinnati. That's why a lot of guys are scared off, and I've seen them price keep dropping down. I'm of the belief that if you can get, even 13, 14, 12 games out of Tyler Eifert, you can find somebody else to hold you over, I think he could do well, just because there's not a lot of options in Cincinnati. They've
Yeah, no, I agree.
AJ Green, and then Gio will probably be on the team. LaFell, I think, would be great, but I don't have a lot of confidence. I don't know about the rookie Boyd. They lost Marvin Jones and Mohamed Sanu, so I just think that if Eifert comes back, he's going to be catching maybe some more passes and definitely still be that red zone threat. But going back to that list, who do you like their bucks off that list?
Well, I mean, if we're looking in that, $2 to $3 range, I don't mind Eric Ebron this year without Megatron being there. He hopefully should be a red zone target. He's athletic. He's all those things. Zach Miller comes to mind in that ballpark. You could sneak a Charles Clay in because who knows what the hell's happening in that offense. And then I think Will Tye wins the job in New York. And if you're drafting early enough, you pick him up for a buck at, where most people wouldn't even think about drafting him, and he finishes as a tight end 11 or something like that. That's a hell of a deal. What do you think?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I ended up with a lot of my teams. I have Zach Miller this year. I think Zach Miller, is going to be a big part of that offense in Chicago. I really think he could have a good year. And again, he's going for next to nothing near the end of an auction. Antonio Gates, if he's going to be playing, he's going to be healthy. He's going to put up numbers with Philip Rivers. I mean, he looks for him. I think Zach Ertz could rebound. I mean, he's going to cost you $7-8 probably. Dwayne Allen is a guy like Jordan Cameron's another guy that could finally bounce back a little bit this year to put up some fantasy numbers. There's a lot of different options in Miami, but both Martellus Bennett and Zach Miller did great under Adam Gase in Chicago, and Adam Gase now is in Miami. And I think that if Jordan Cameron is ever going to have a decent year again, it's going to have to be this year with Adam Gase, and no one's talking about him right now either. So he's a guy to take a flyer on later on. Because I think that with Adam Gase there, he should get him involved in that offense again. And he did have talent, but after that one big year he had in Cleveland, hasn't done much. So guys like Martellus Bennett, a lot of people are quite excited about him going to New England. And I like New England. I just don't see him. I can see him having a good game here and there, maybe be a better best ball type player, but I don't just think there will be any consistency there. I really don't think he's going to be, the Aaron Hernandez. So I really don't put a lot of stock in him, don't have a lot of shares of him. So I think that, there's a lot of tight ends here that could have good games. After you get away, I think Ladarius Green, we all expect him to. Julius Thomas should be good, but both those guys go for cheaper than, the big names. Gary Barnidge really isn't getting any love, even though he finished as a top 5 tight end last year, top 3, if I remember correctly. Fourth. And there's a guy that, if he's still not quite 100% healthy, but if he's playing, I mean, there's a lot of question marks at receiver there. He's the only guy that's been there and put up numbers. The only difference could be, though, RG3 could be at quarterback, so that could change things a little bit for him.
He's been looking good in camp. RG3's been looking good. Today.
Well, yeah. I did some number crunching with tight ends too. Yeah. Looked at tight ends who had over 150 points and then tight ends who had over 200 points. And, the numbers are similar since 2011, 14, then in 2012, 11 the next year, 12, and then 11. So we're looking at 11 or 12 guys that'll put up over 150, guys over 200. We got 5 guys in 2011, 5 again in 12, 6 and 13, 5 and 14, and 5 and 15. So the numbers are pretty consistent. There's those 4 or 5 guys that are going to put up over 200. Last year was Gronk, Reed, Walker, Barnidge, and Olsen. Before that, Gronk, Graham, Gates, Olsen, and Martellus Bennett. So you can take, Graham was actually in there from 2011 right through to 2014 as a guy who put up over 200 plus, but he has kind of fallen off the face of the earth now all of a sudden. It's amazing. The other guys that did that are like Tony Gonzalez. He's retired. Jason Witten was in there for a couple of years. Vernon Davis for 1, Julius Thomas for one. So really, Heath Miller was actually in there back in 2012 too. So, only guys that are really consistently in there right now, potentially this year, would be the guys from last year: Gronk, Reed, Walker, Barnage, Olsen have a chance. But I think there's a lot of other guys that have a chance. But again, if you're going to spend up on tight end, 50, well, I guess I shouldn't say they're over 200 plus. I mean, a couple times guys hovered over 300. Rob Gronkowski, the 1 year, would have been the second highest point getter, even in receiving ranks. So that's a big question. We've done articles on it before, is do you take Gronk or not? And, for me, he's too expensive.
Yeah, me too. And he's an injury away from, he's going to get banged up, and you're not going to get him for 16 weeks or probably not even 14 weeks, right? So then what do? You spend $45 on Gronk, and you're combing the waiver wire for hope and a prayer.
Yeah, you really don't find that kind of production, and especially in tight end circles. If Gronk goes down, you definitely can't replace him. Yeah. So it's tough.
Yeah, I think these two positions I draft very much in the same way, and I love the comment that you made earlier about throwing out the big name quarterbacks in the first round or your first couple nominations, and I think this is another position to do that too. Throw Gronk out right away, get him out of there. Throw Jordan Reed, get him out of there right away, and then all of a sudden the guy's got Cam Newton and Jordan Reed, and he's not bidding on much for a long time. Right, so it frees up some money for you, and away you go. And there will be guys that have that, right? 2 rounds in, they've got Cam Newton and Jordan Reed.
Well, some guys want to come in and try to get. They'll have this is the top 3 guys at each position. And they'll try to get, if they can, they'd like to get one of those guys at each position, or one of the top 5 in each position, and build their team from there. And it's not it's not a bad strategy. I mean, we've done a few snake drafts this year too, because of those different like pro-am type leagues, celebrity leagues, or these other things where you try to or like the Data Force one, where we're trying out a new site. And I've toyed with some different strategies where I've had, if I felt like I was kind of weak at one position, I really wanted to make sure I was as strong as I possibly could be at every other one, or as many other ones as I could. So for example, in some drafts where I thought maybe I'm a little bit weak at running back, but I want to be strong at everything else that I can. So I'm going to get the best possible 2 tight end combination, or I'll even go after the best kicker possible, the best defense possible, just so that if I can shore up as many holes as possible, instead of being mediocre at 2 or 3 positions, be really good at as many as I can, so that I really only have to concentrate on hitting the waiver wire for my running backs, for example. Right. So for example, if it came down to the choice between picking Ladarius Green as a second tight end to perhaps Tyler Eifert or Greg Olsen or something, or I could have been picking, another running back, say, I don't know, TJ Yeldon or somebody like that. TJ Yeldon's not necessarily going to help me, but a guy like Ladarius Green's going to give me, so much depth at tight end that I'm not going to have to worry about that position all year long, for example. Yeah. So I want to make sure that so I've toyed with that, and in an auction, I would probably look at that similarly. I say, okay, well, I want to make sure I'm strong here, so I'm going to spend $15 on my 2 tight ends, and I'm going to get, Zach Ertz and Delaney Walker, or if that was possible, Travis Kelce, whoever I could. So now I'm good there. I don't have to worry about it. So I don't even know where that story and rant came from, but that's just
that's just where it is. Yeah. Well, and I think that my strategy with the tight ends and the quarterbacks hasn't changed in the last couple of years. It's really, where do you put your money do you put them in the running backs? You put it in the receivers? Do you combo it up? Like, what does that look like? And that's where, like you say, you're experimenting with different lineups, and that's where mocking comes into play. That's where, like I said before, just making teams, right? Spending your $200 and saying, it could look like this, or it could look like this, or it could look like that. And what does your team look like if you spent money on Greg Olsen and Andrew Luck? What does your team look like if it's Alex Smith and Zach Miller? And which one do you like more? Which one do you trust more? And doing that in your mocks or out on paper or whatever the case may be, it's that practice that when you get into the draft and you're like Slim was a couple of years ago when Price enforces on Peyton Manning, he goes, oh, but he knew where he was going once he did that. It wasn't like he went, and then went, oh, well, my draft's screwed. He went, okay, well, I'm going to plan D. And I know what plan D is because I've been there 3 times already.
Yeah.
You know, so it's doing your homework in that regards.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
No, you got to have a lot of plans and a lot of options, and all this talk. Like if we do all this stuff, and we do our we're supposed to be doing a lot of writing, and it's not. Maybe
you
good
guys
enough,
have been doing some writing.
All that makes me want to do is just draft, though. So now I have to go on a draft.
There you go. Well, we'll try to get that mock draft in next week, and Blister's just talking about writing. You can head to the website, thefantasyfootballauction.com. We do have free articles that are posted on there. We do have some free auction values that are listed also on the page. But if you want to become a member, $14.95 gets you, just like thousands and thousands of words that are just auction-specific content. And we just expanded our rankings for the membership area as well as in the running back and the receiver areas in particular. So you get hundreds and hundreds of rankings in that regard. We have them now set up with a 10 and 12 and 14 team AAV, average auction value. And then we do have our 2 metrics of the PRV, which is that positional ranking value, which we talked about last week on the podcast. And we also have the VI indicator, which now I kind of have heat mapped on the website as well. So the green will indicate guys that are of good value. The red will be guys that you should be staying away, and yellow is kind of that cautionary stuff. So taking a look at where the value is found according to our average auction values. Excuse me. So that's the type of stuff you're going to get out of the members area. We're also trying to create a members community using Google Spaces. So we've got a few guys that are on there. We're trying to generate the auction community that way. If you're not interested in supporting the website through the membership, you can support the podcast. Go on to iTunes, give us a ranking or a rating, give us a review. All of that will help us out. You can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Auction, or the Twitter community we're trying to start for auction players as well as at FF Auction Advice. So that's a place you can go to ask questions about auctions, and we'll be there answering those questions as well. Anything else to add? Blister, I think we covered quarterback and tight end probably pretty good, and we're well over the hour mark.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I hope next week we can get 12 live people to do our auction mock, and then we'll be able to talk about that. And it's the best way to get a feel for prices, and then you can strategize from there.
Yeah, so probably what we'll do is post on Twitter maybe a day before the podcast. So take a look maybe on Monday of next week and say, we're going to set up a fake ESPN league rather than setting it up just in the mock auction lobbies. Just set up a league and get some people to come in. And so some listeners, if you want to come in and mock with us, we can post a link and get some guys dialed in, and it'll be the 3 of us, and we'll be looking probably for 9 other guys then, so we can get a 12 team in there and do a mock, and we'll record it live on the air, at least the first few rounds, because it's interesting. We usually go in with different strategies and then talk about what it feels like trying to draft to that strategy, quarterback heavy or running back heavy or that type of thing. So the mock auction episode is always a big one, and be on the lookout on Twitter, because we'll probably post a link out there to try to get some guys in on that mock with us for next week.
Oops.
Right, Blister?
That's right. I don't know if I just disconnected or not, but
no, you're here.
Goddamn.
All right.
Okay.
Am I here? Are you here?
You're there, bud.
All right,
It's all
buddy.
good.
Okay, so it's late. We got a late start tonight, and it's Wednesday, and we were anti-slim tonight. Or sans slim, not anti-slim. We're never anti-slim.
Songs.
And
Just
so
sans.
hopefully, sans. We'll get that all organized for next week. We'll get the mock auction going, and it'll be good. So, Blister, hopefully I'll Well, maybe I'll see you on the links tomorrow, men's night.
I hope so.
Maybe. Yeah. And if not, I'll be at Shasha with the One Too Many Teas. And for the rest of you, I will see you when it's springtime in the Rockies.